We're live.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to our season 5, episode number 1. And today I'm sick and I can't talk. And I'm with my friend Denise. Hi, Denise. How are you?
I'm okay. Sorry to hear that you're sick. And that's terrible. But I hear a lot of stuff is going around.
Yeah. Where
Yeah.
can they find you? Denise?
So I'm Denise Lanzarone. I'm with Keller Williams Realty, with Points North in Woodbury. And I am a senior real estate specialist. So we are bringing you this information. This is our 5th season. We're happy to say. Oh, we got
Hi,
our
Sue. Hi,
Sue
John.
on and Jean on. Hi,
Jean?
girls. And we are live on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook, Denise Lanzarone, your agent for life, and on Instagram, Denise Lanzarone, and on LinkedIn, Denise Lanzarone. So we're just trying to get all this information out to you guys so that you make life a little easier. It's very difficult as we become a little bit older and all these things are thrown at us. I know myself, I'm applying for Medicare right now, and it's very confusing to me. So hopefully we can provide you with a lot of information.
Okay, and you can find me everywhere. I'm Sandra Roman, and you can find me everywhere at Sandra Roman Real Estate. And that's it. Today I can't talk too much. Who is our guest? What is the topic?
So today we're going to talk about pre-planning for your funeral. Now, a lot of people, I know that my parents and the older generations never like to talk about funerals and never like to discuss their finances and things like that. But we really need to discuss that. So we brought in our expert from Maloney Funeral Home, Danielle Marino.
Let me bring her.
Hey, Danielle.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, Kelly. Hi, Danielle.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I was just explaining little things, a little bit about, I know how my family was growing up, that nobody wanted to talk about funerals or finances or anything like that. As kids, we weren't privy to any of that information. So I feel it's important that we get things out in the open nowadays. And so tell us a little bit about what you do.
All right, so I'm Danielle Marino. I'm a licensed funeral director at Maloney Funeral Home. We have several locations all across Long Island in Suffolk County. You can find us at maloneyfh.com. 7 locations. Our, I'll say, most east location would be Center Moriches. And then we are, I'll say, as west as Central Islip and Hop Hog. We're one of the only funeral homes on Long Island that own and operate their own crematory. We are family operated, so we are not owned by a corporation. And the Maloneys have been in business for almost 100 years, since 1933. So they've been around a long time, very trusted, very well known in the community. Definitely pride on the Maloney standard, serving families and taking care of any different wants and needs.
Great.
Let's. Oops, sorry. Go, Denise.
So what do you think is the most important thing to start pre-planning?
I would say the earlier, the better. Since COVID, that's where I'm really seeing a change with pre-planning, because a lot of people are getting more comfortable with talking about things ahead of time, before something happens, before they're sick, before they, experience any financial hardships, just, starting the pre-planning process. What can they prepare for their family, for their next of kins that will alleviate stress when the time comes? Pre-planning could really be as simple as coming in and talking about your wishes and your wants, giving vital information. That's a big stress that I see when someone passes away, is really just getting the vital information needed to complete a death certificate. That will require parents' full names, including the mother's maiden last name. A lot of families don't know that, or they know that information, but they don't know the exact spelling, which is a big concern because, again, this is filed with the town and it's very hard to do corrections. So spelling is important. We need to know where the loved one is born. Sometimes, they'll know, oh, yeah, it was in New York, but, what borough? It does make a difference. Social security numbers is a big thing. A lot of times families might have mom and dad's social security number, mixed up. Again, putting in any type of correction once a death certificate is filed is kind of a lengthy process because we have to get the documentations that the town will require and a reason why it was given incorrect. So it's not impossible to do, but it's something that we absolutely want to make sure we're double and triple checking this information when the time comes. So that we don't run into this issue where it's filed and then we have to go do a correction. So by pre-planning, we already have the vital information from that person. So we are confident that vital information is correct. A big, I'll say,
Wait, I have a. I already start with the question. I'm sorry. So, vital information. What will be vital information? Like a list of vital information.
So it's the individual's legal name. I'll always ask what's on their social security card. So if there's a middle name that's used or just a middle initial, that's very important. We want to know the legal name, not a nickname or, sometimes that gets a little hectic, I'll say. Old school folks, they might go by a different name and they maybe never legally changed it. So we can do an AKA, that sort of thing. But even sometimes it gets crazy. What is mom or dad's legal first name, not their nickname? It would be their home address. Again, sometimes that's stressful because if an individual sold their home and now is in an assisted living family or a nursing home, families will be kind of confused. Well, mom's never, most likely going to leave the facility, but her mail gets forwarded to my house. So, then I'll kind of explain to the family, we should have it where the mail is being sent, but we can have it as the facility that they're living at. It would be their social security number, their date of birth. Again, this can sometimes cause a hiccup. I know, back in the day, if someone was born on a particular day, sometimes their birth certificate wasn't filed until a week or the following month. So I have so many times where families come in and they're like, listen, this is when we celebrated mom's birthday, but this is her actual birthday. So again, by taking all this information, it's really alleviating a lot of stress for when the time comes. Again, parents' names go on the death certificate, the mother's maiden last name, so not her married last name. Place of birth, again, we want to, it doesn't have to be the hospital, or if the person was born at home, we don't have to put that home address. We just need to put, the township. So Stony Brook, New York, or Queens, or Brooklyn. But again, we want to make sure all this information is correct as possible. It'll be their occupation, what they did for a living prior to retirement. We cannot put retired. We do have to put some sort of occupation or disabled, homemaker, something along those lines. And highest level of education, which, is just a few, kind of bullet points that we check off. So either high school, less than high school, some college, and then up from there. So that's all vital information that will go on a death certificate when the time comes.
Interesting. Yeah.
I know.
A lot of us don't really know what's involved, or even when you tell them, I'm just going to take a little bit of information. This is to help create a profile for mom and complete a death certificate. Once you start really asking about where they were born and their education, sometimes they're like, well, what do you need this for? And then when you really just show them a rough draft, or you explain to them this is to settle financial aspects, then they're kind of like, okay, let me reach out to an uncle or an aunt, and let me make sure I get the parents' names correct. It's not something that we really want to guess at and just assume that it's spelt a certain way.
Yeah. What
Interesting.
else?
Interesting. A lot of the old documents I know are, like you said, are not really accurate. I know with my grandparents, they were immigrants, so they, you know, that the file that all the
Yes.
information is not very accurate and different. Nobody really knew when my grandmother was born, and yes, things like
Right.
that.
A lot of times, the longer, I'll say Italian last names, they'll shorten them when they come to America or just over the years. So I know that's tricky too, again, because just because an individual goes by a last name, the parents might have a different last name. Again, you want to keep it what would be on the parents' birth certificate for their name. So that definitely, it gets very tricky, and it can get stressful, not pre-planning, and then a death occurs and we're really, I say starting from scratch, because that's really what it is. And it just is another thing on the next of kin, or the family's plate.
Yeah. Another
So
thing to
that,
worry about when you're
oops.
grieving.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that is not, can easily be taken care of. Again, not even so much pre-funding, take the finances out of it, just an individual stepping forward, giving us their vitals, talking about their wants, just getting things down on pen and paper, will really alleviate, guesses when someone passes away.
What can you tell us about the wants and needs? What is that? That will be like the second part, or like a
Yes,
second step of
I would
planning?
say that's definitely the second part. The first step is always, taking the vitals, just really starting that profile, and then needs and wants. That's really when we talk about, are we having any services, a visitation, open casket, closed casket. Religious services are a big hiccup. Maybe mom and dad are religious, but they haven't been to church in a very long time. And then the death occurs and the kids are just besides themselves, because they don't know what the right thing to do is. They don't know, should they have a funeral mass, or should they just have a deacon come in? A lot of times families don't even know that that's an option. They think
Oh,
because their parent hasn't been to church, that they can't have a service at the funeral home. So needs and wants are, again, a big stress factor, because they're really taking a guess. Unless that person expressed what they wanted exactly, the kids or the spouse are really left guessing if nothing, was pre-planned.
yeah, that's what I was talking to my father, for example, because my sister goes to a church. I go to a different church.
Right.
So I told him, you need to put in your wants and needs what you want, and that's what we're going to do. Because if you leave nothing, then it's going to be a problem, because my sister is going to want something, and we're only two. And I'm going to want something different because I go to a different church. So
Right.
that's going to be, trouble right there.
Right. And how did your dad take that? Was he open to saying, what he wanted, or
Yeah, he already has that
okay.
that thing. But I told him, whatever you want, put it in writing.
Yes, that always helps, even just a simple, it doesn't have to be necessarily done with an attorney. It could be done with the funeral director. It could just be a hand, written or typed letter, that pretty much states, my wishes are to have a mass. My wishes are to, have a closed casket visitation. So, at least even writing something down that expresses what they want. Again, it doesn't leave so much room for their family, their next of kin, to have to guess when the time comes.
Can they pick like flowers and everything else?
You can select everything. So what I'll do, depending on the situation, if someone is near passing, I still ask, is it okay if we look at caskets or urns? But I'm more so pushed to do that because, someone is going to pass soon. If it's way in advance, again, I'll still ask, what do you feel comfortable selecting? And then we can pick everything. We can pick flowers. We can pick out prayer cards. We can pick out music to be played during the visitation. We can even talk a little bit if there is going to be a funeral mass. Most of the churches will provide us with the pamphlets that are filled out when the time comes. So it'll give examples for you to pick one reading from the New Testament, one reading from the Old Testament, and hymns, the songs to be played during church. So that's something that we can, we'd like to talk about and go through that, especially if it's someone who's very religious. A lot of times they come in with that information already. They know exactly what readings they want, who they want to do the readings, who's going to bring up the gifts. So we really can select everything possible. We can even, we have families that will bring in clothing, or they'll just say, oh, I have, my garments together in my closet and everything is labeled. I'm going to tell my daughter or my son where they are. And, on the other hand, we have families that come in and they don't want to pick out flowers. That's something that they, if it's an individual themselves, sometimes they want their children to pick out flowers when the time comes. Or a lot of times they'll just allot, X amount of dollars. And so at least the funding will be there, but the next of kin gets to pick out the flowers, when the time comes. And I would say the same thing with the prayer cards. Sometimes families will just know exactly what they want and they'll pick out their own prayer cards. Or sometimes, again, they'll just financially take care of it, but they'll want those items to be selected when the time comes. I would say it's probably 50-50. And I see, making full, set of selections versus maybe just partially.
So one of our fellow realtors, Lily, has said she had a great pre-planning experience for her grandmother. I asked her to tell us more about it, but so we'll see if she says anything else, but that's good. That's a positive thing. I could see it being really positive that family doesn't have to worry about deciding everything at that moment.
Yes, I had a brother and sister come into the funeral home maybe a couple of weeks ago or last month, and mom's doing well, but they were applying for Medicaid and they sold her house. She went into a facility, so they had, really no choice but to step forward and make some arrangements for her and, do a spend down, which I could talk a little bit about in a few moments. But the last item I'll always say that we'll select or we'll talk about would be a casket. And so once we were coming up from the showroom, the daughter was like, I feel so much better. I didn't know that I was holding on to so much and that this was really bringing me down, but I feel a lot better that this is done. So that's definitely something that I hear a lot. I would say almost 100% of the time that families don't realize how much that they're holding on to until they get into.
I have a weird question. How many type of caskets do you have?
If keeping it basic, you'll have wood and steel. And then obviously woods are, there's so many different types of woods, whether it's a hardwood, a veneer, a poplar, and then steel caskets could be stainless steel, which is rust resistant. It could be a 16 gauge steel, which is like a very thick, heavy casket. 18 gauge and 20 gauge would be something very thin, very light. You can also get into the bronze and the coppers. There's I'll say a lot of different options, but primarily I try and keep it simple. I'll really just ask the family, do you have a preference between wood or metal? And then either we just go through the selection room if they're not sure, and then we'll narrow it down from there. Or a lot of times families know if they want wood or if they want metal. And then we'll just go to that section and then we can kind of break it down from there. Is it about cost? Is it about the style, the hardware, what's on the interior? Caskets are, a lot different on the inside. So in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of different caskets, but, to keep it basic, we're talking about woods, versus a metal casket.
Fancy
so we
stuff.
had Jean. I know she lost her husband a couple of years ago. She said that she pre-planned her husband's. It went so much smoother and no stress. And Lily said that with her grandmother, she was planning for Medicaid. Okay. Her grandmother picked out her casket, mass cards, and when her death happened, I made one phone call and everything was done.
Yes. That is true. We always will want to follow up, even if something is planned and prepaid, we don't assume anything. So we'll either ask the family just to have a phone conversation or to step forward in the funeral home, take care of any, final paperwork and just confirm all the details. But at least everything is done. If they want to see something and, oh, I don't remember what the casket looked like, we can review those items, but it doesn't mean that, anything has to change or, that we have to put them through looking at these items again. We, really can just make it brief, and in a couple of minutes we can, kind of have them, on their way. And really about Medicaid, not to get too crazy into that, but we do see a lot of families, for Medicaid spend downs, whether they're going into a facility or they just need extra help and they do need to spend down a little bit financially to qualify, meaning that, their loved one just, has too much. We will see families come into the funeral home and prepay. So they're able to prepay for themselves, their spouse, their children, and their children's spouses. So that's awesome, because I know, again, nobody really likes to talk about these things, but unfortunately, a funeral is something that all of us are going to have to experience at some point. So if there is X amount of dollars, there's only so much, for Medicaid that they can, I'll say, spend this money down on. Prepaying for funerals is a great way, to let that individual qualify for Medicaid, and you're taking care of something that, is going to definitely eventually be needed.
So there's a question. Can you rent a casket? Can you rent a casket if planning on cremation?
Yes. So some funeral homes have rental caskets. Maloney's, we do not, only because rental caskets are reused and reused and reused. It's just really an insert that's taken from the casket, and that cardboard container insert, that's what's cremated. So at Maloney's, we don't offer rentals, only because we don't want to put our families through that. Reselling caskets and, removing them from it. So when it comes to a cremation and needing a wood casket, we have a lot of different options, different prices to help families that are having a service and then a cremation. This way, for really the same amount of money, they'll be able to just stay in that casket for the visitation, for the church service, and then they're cremated in that casket. They're never removed from it, and it's never reused.
Interesting. Sue said, I had to pre-plan my mom's when we applied for Medicaid. For her, it was like a business deal and much easier without all the emotional stuff attached.
Yeah, because you're not in that time. You are like right now. We're talking about it. Ha 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 ha. Well, I'm choosing the flowers. I'm choosing the casket, but we don't have that emotion attached because it's not happening right now.
Yes.
And Mindy, who's on the call, asked if you can contact her after the session. So I can send you. She put her email address in here, so I can send you her email address.
Absolutely.
When we're done. So
Danielle, what about the monies? Do we plan that too?
Yes. So a lot of different options with pre-funding. Pre-funding could be something where the individual is looking to step forward and fully fund the funeral, meaning, whatever the total is, they'll take care of that. They will be price guaranteed once we're paid in full, but we are pretty flexible. We have a lot of families that will make monthly payments. We even do direct debit. So the funds are actually held in a trust company. We use cooperative funeral funding. So they can do a direct debit. So every month or, every other month, X amount of dollars can come out of their checking or their savings and go into, what I like to call a savings account for this individual. Or sometimes families, they just old school, they like to stop in with a check, see us, they like to mail in a check. So as far as prepaying, we're pretty flexible. It just depends on what the needs are of the particular family. Life insurance is a little bit different. What we do with life insurance is we want to make sure the policy is in good standing. So if there is going to be an assignment when the time comes, meaning that the life insurance company is going to make payment to the funeral home directly, I always ask the family to send me any information about the policy. I want to know the company name, the policy number, who the beneficiaries are, and what the face value is. Life insurance, it needs to be open for more than 2 years for it to be assignable or for us to take it as a form of payment. It has to be in good standing. So the premiums have to be, up to date. Can't be any loans on it or anything like that. And what I'll do is I'll normally call with the family and just, want to verify all of this information. This way, if anything's going on with it, we can kind of address that when the time comes. So as long as everything is good to go with the policy, again, we'll make a photocopy of a recent statement or the booklet that they get when they sign up for the policy, and we'll just keep it on that individual's profile when the time comes. Life insurance is another thing that gets kind of tricky. It's good to know everything ahead of time. I just had a woman come in last week, and her husband's not doing too well. And she thought that he had a policy, fairly large policy, and she wasn't really sure about, what it entailed when the time comes, to get the payment. So I was like, let's call together. I want to see what paperwork we're going to need, just so that you're aware of it, and we'll help you through it. So thank goodness that I called, because there was a loan taken out on it. The wife said she had no idea about it. She didn't even know when it was taken out. And they weren't paying the interest on the loan taken out. So although she thought she was in good standing because she had been paying the premium, she's like, look, I took I wrote on here the date and the check number that I took care of the premium for the year, but they haven't been paying the interest on the loan. So it was a good thing that we called, and the insurance broker was able to send her all the information about the loan, when it was taken out, how much it was for. So at least she can kind of get some background information before he passes away. We will have to, close out the policy upon his passing, but at least now she has an idea of it. Whereas if she didn't come into the funeral home or ask for help, she would kind of be blindsided by this when the time comes, thinking that she's going to have funding, or she's not going to have to, pay anything out of pocket. But, unfortunately, she's going to have to make other arrangements for payment because the policy is not good.
Interesting.
Okay, hold on. So I can go and pre-plan and then start making my payments. And
Yes.
Then I can pay with the life insurance. That's another way of paying, right?
Yes. So some families, even though they have life insurance, it might be more than enough to cover the balance of the funeral. We do have families that want to start paying it down. Again, we will guarantee our charges once we're paid in full. So that's one of the benefits of prepaying. Once you're paid in full, those prices are locked in. So with inflation, everything on the funeral home end will be, those prices at the time that it's paid in full. So one of the benefits is, even if there's life insurance policy, we can still help the next of kin or the beneficiaries do the death claim for that life insurance policy. But if the funeral charges are paid in full, they will just get paid out directly from the life insurance company. Okay. Or if it's not fully funded, we'll just, at the time of passing, we'll let the family know what the total of the funeral home or what the total of the funeral charges are, and then what's in their cooperative funeral funding account, and then the balance due, we could put that through to the life insurance company. So we see a lot of different scenarios. It just kind of depends on when the individual started making the payments, how much, the total of the funeral home charges are, and, how much they've or how long they've been paying into it, depending, really how much, of the balance that's going to be due, or, is it already paid in full?
Now, the question is how expensive it is.
Again, that will really vary.
And what it's included.
Right. It will really, really vary depending on the type of selected. I would say, an average funeral, you're probably in the $12,000 to $15,000 ballpark figure. Again, that I'm talking about a full service, a visitation, maybe a funeral mass, a casket. There's so many different options. If we're looking to do a simple cremation, obviously that's much, much less. Cemeteries are, a big expense. That's another thing with pre-planning. We will call the cemetery and make sure who the deed holder is. Is there room in the grave? Does that person have a right to burial in that grave? So a lot of times families will come in and there'll be an old, I'll say, family plot somewhere, and they're just assuming that, oh yeah, mom and dad, they're going to go to St. Charles. There's plenty of room there. And then we call and maybe it's a different story. Maybe there's not, any more room, or maybe there's only room for cremated remains and the individual wanted to be buried. So that is a big, big stress, for families when the time comes, is cemeteries, and they don't really understand how it works.
So the place, actually, if I want to be buried, that's another expense.
Yes. So purchasing property is done through the cemetery directly. When it comes to pre-planning or when a death occurs, we will put the opening and closing charge of that grave on there. So that's something that we can do on the funeral home end. Same thing with an entombment or a niche, an above ground crypt. We can put the opening and closing charge on there and the inscription fee for the niche or for the crypt front. But yes, the cemetery purchasing property, that would be completely separate from anything that takes place with the funeral home. We can kind of help the family, give them ideas, if they want a Catholic cemetery, non-denominational, if they want something small, something large, we can kind of help them and give them a little bit of information where to go and who to speak with. But they do need to make an appointment and meet with a representative from the cemetery to purchase property or to see it.
So real estate is not included.
No.
You know any real estate people, Sandra?
No. Maybe we need to start digging.
So Jean has a question. She said, now I'm not planning on passing in the near future. How far in advance is appropriate?
I don't think that there's an age limit. I will have families come in their 30s and their 40s and start planning.
Really?
And yes, on the other side, I will have, an individual maybe in their early or late 80s, and they're stepping forward and they're saying, I'm healthy, but I just don't know what could happen, and I don't want this to be left on my children. So I would say there's no age. I can't really say that I see a particular age group. In general, pre-planning, I would say it's honestly very, very mixed.
So I know that, actually, then the way you were saying it before, if you prepay and you plan, then you kind of locked into a price. So inflation is only going to go up. So you're better off doing it sooner than later, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And what else I was going to ask you? I remember we saw you at Brightview, and somebody asked about veterans, what the veterans would cover, and you had said that it was just the funeral, the cemetery and the stone. Since then, my uncle passed away, who wasn't a veteran, and he was cremated. So is he eligible? He's still eligible for a site at the National Cemetery, correct?
Yes. So as long as he was honorably discharged, he would still be eligible for burial at a national cemetery. He could either go into a traditional, I'll say, land grave, or he can go into a columbarium, which is, think of a large wall that has individual niches that his cremains can be, placed above ground. And there's no source for that.
Okay. Yeah, because I think my aunt changed her mind and decided now she wants to put him into this national cemetery. Kathy wants to know what if you move out of state after you prepay a funeral?
So if you were to move, the funds are portable. Again, they're held, think of it as like a savings account in trust of, the beneficiary. So they are portable if someone was to move anywhere to Florida, the Carolinas. What would happen is at the time of their passing, if they were still going to come back to New York, Maloney Funeral Home would take care of everything for them. So they just simply would make one phone call and we'll take care of finding an affiliate funeral home wherever they're located. Or if they were not doing anything, I'll say in New York or Long Island anymore, the funeral home that their family steps forward to make arrangements with, they just let them know that they have funds in a pre-planning account, and that funeral home can submit for the payment directly. So it is portable. The only thing to keep in mind is when we open the accounts, they're either made revocable or irrevocable. Revocable is for those that are not on Medicaid or not going to apply for Medicaid. Revocable, it can be changed, it can be canceled. If there's any extra money in the account, then it can go directly back to the family when the time comes. If they change their mind, they can cancel it out, get the money back. If we make it irrevocable, again, those that are either going to apply for Medicaid or on Medicaid, this money that goes into the account doesn't count as an asset for that individual anymore. That's when we could never return any money back to the family. So again, it could be portable, but they need to understand that all the funds in the account are going to have to be used towards the funeral purposes. No money could ever go back if they completely change what type of services they want. They're still going to have to, pick out memorial items or something just to use all the money in that account. Otherwise, it's supposed to go back to the county.
So it's not the same as when you take out the irrevocable trust that you have a trustee. So it can't go back to the trustee.
That's correct. Yes.
So like the funeral home becomes the trustee. Is that right?
Almost, yes. So with irrevocable, we can't write a check back to the family. It can't be canceled out. So we make sure that we spend all of the money in the account towards, I'll say all funeral related items. It's really because for Medicaid, they don't want it to be where someone could say, oh yeah, I'll go make funeral arrangements for myself and my wife to qualify for Medicaid, and then turn around and close out the account and get the money back. So by making it irrevocable, that's kind of the only way that they can make sure that, the money isn't being returned.
Interesting. Very interesting. I learned a lot.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is. Anybody, is anything else you were going to discuss?
I guess a little bit about the veterans benefits. I know a lot of families will come in and they think that everything is taken care of, or they're going to get some financing from the VA. And that's, I'll say untrue. What happens is when someone is honorably discharged and has a DD 214, their honorable discharge form, they are entitled for a burial at a national cemetery. So there's no fee for the property, the grave, the headstone, the inscription, and there's no fees to open and close this property. But as far as if the family wants services, a visitation, casket, those items are not taken care of by the VA. So I feel like that definitely can be a little bit confusing if families aren't aware of that, or they're under the assumption that they're going to just step forward to the funeral home and everything's going to be taken care of. It is obviously a huge expense that's, absorbed by them being a veteran with the cemetery, but everything on the funeral home end would still apply. I know there's different death benefits that family can apply for after the passing occurs, but that's more of a reimbursement, and it's minimal. They might refund the family for the hearse or transportation fees, but they're not going to get back tens of thousands of dollars.
That's good to know. And that discharge paper is very important. I remember with my dad, I had to find that.
Yes. Or if it's lost, if you have enough time, we can submit to the National Archive, so we can request an additional, copy to be, mailed or emailed to the family. So you always can, get, a backup copy, but it does take a little bit of time.
Yes.
So if someone passes and they don't have it, it'll go through eligibility at the cemetery, which normally takes at least 72 hours. And what they do is they just they're going to have to search for the records, being that there was a fire many years ago and destroyed a lot of records. So once it goes through eligibility, they will get an answer, yes or no, if they are entitled for burial, but it's a minimum of 72 hours and weekends do not count. So it would be Monday through Friday strictly. So I know sometimes that's, a lot on a family, that they're kind of in limbo for, think of it almost a week, not knowing if, they're going to be able to go to a national cemetery or not.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions out there? We have a lot of people listening in. We're so happy to have you all back and with us. Just type your questions in if you have anything else.
I have a question.
Okay.
What does people do the most? Do they cremate or do they bury it?
I would say it's still really, 50-50. Cremation rates are high. It's probably about 55% just in general, but we still have a lot of families that are still choosing a traditional burial or entombment. I would say it's about half and half.
But what's less expensive? Cremation?
Cremation is less expensive just solely because really of the cemetery.
Because of the real estate.
Yes, you don't have, the fees, or you could still place cremated remains at the cemetery, but usually it's much less to open and close a grave for an urn than a casket. It's something that could be done at a later time. So I always tell families, think of cremation. It's more of a convenience. You can have a memorial visiting in months from now. You could wait until the warmer weather to go to the cemetery. So obviously with a casket burial, you're pressed for time. Those services are going to take place pretty quickly. You don't really have too much time to really ponder and, kind of wait on it. If it's raining, if it's snowing, we cannot, do anything to change that. Whereas with cremation, you could wait till the warmer weather, or plan around a child having exams at school, or someone getting married. So with cremation, you have more flexibility.
Yep. Yeah, true. Okay.
Yes, intense. We started with a intense topic.
Yes.
Now, Lily said she did bury her mom's ashes with her parents at the cemetery years after her death. It was easy. Yeah, so that's good. Good to know. Mindy wants to know, how do I set up an appointment with you?
So I can provide my email address, or she can give a call to the main line to Lake Ronkonkoma. I could give that information, and she could set an appointment up that way, either by phone or by email, whatever is easier.
Let me put your email in the chat, and then I'll send it to her as well.
Okay. So D Marino, MARINO, at Maloney, MOLONEY, FH, like funeral home.com.
Okay. Ian wants to know, how's your dad, Sandra?
He's doing good.
Good.
With his Parkinson's, he is having normal problems with Parkinson's, and he is right now forgetting a lot of stuff. But in general, he's doing good. Thank you for asking.
Oh, computer froze. Okay. Yeah, Mindy, I'll send you Danielle's email in an email to you personally also, if you don't see it in the chat. And I guess that's it.
That's it.
Thank you
What?
so much, Danielle. That was great.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very
Yeah,
much.
we happy to have you. So this is our 5th season. Like we said, this is the first episode of this season. I don't know how many are we doing? 5 or 6 maybe?
6.
I don't know.
Who's next?
We'll see. But
Oh, it's a surprise.
we got some more people lined up. Next week we have Kyle Bannon lined up, and he does home modifications. So he can put in handrails and ramps and things like that, which is very helpful. He's also an occupational therapist. So that will be good for next week. We look forward to that. And we hope you can all join us. Thank you so much again, Danielle.
Where can they find you, Danielle, before we go again?
So you could find me at Maloney Funeral Home. You can access us through maloneyfh.com, or you can always send me an email at dmarino@maloneyfh.com.
Denise, where are you?
Right now I'm in Montauk, but
oh, that's why I see different background.
Yeah, different background today. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can call me anytime, 631-922-5985. And I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Well, and you can find me in Sandra Roman Real Estate everywhere. Hopefully next week I can talk more. And adios, amigos. That's it. See you next week.
Bye, guys.
Good night.